We all want to retire, and we all know that it's probably time to start one of those retirement accounts. Well, how do I know which retirement account is best for me? In today's episode, I discuss retirement accounts, the Roth IRA, and the traditional IRA. In the beginning, just kidding, I won't bore you with all the wonderful details on legislation and how all this stuff got passed, but just know that in the 70s, the government wanted to incentivize saving for retirement. It was repealed sometime in the 80s and then rebirthed sometime in the mid 90s. And now we have two types of retirement accounts, traditional IRA and the Roth IRA. There's something else called a non-deductible IRA, but that's pretty much kind of like the traditional IRA that was non-deductible because you made too much money. I'll get into it a little bit later. Just know that right now, as of 2020, IRS tax law, we have access to two types of retirement accounts. Now, please don't go anywhere just yet. We're going to go into more detail on how this actually matters and which one you should take. But just know that as of this video, IRS still incentivizes us to save for retirement. And that's very important. It's very important that you take time to really research and understand these types of accounts now, because as we've seen in history, these accounts can be repealed, the tax codes can be revised, and they tend to do this every 10 or so years. So it's a good time to start doing it now because we can be quote unquote grandfathered into having some of these tax advantage accounts. Traditional IRA provides tax deduction and tax deferment. A Roth IRA, on the other hand, provides tax deferment and tax-free distributions. The non-deductible IRA provides tax-deferred gains and pro rata tax-free income when you take out money from the account. So now that we got those three types, who can contribute to these accounts? I heard I made too much money, or I make too little money, or I'm too old. Who can contribute to these accounts? Well, after the Secure Act passed at the end of 2019, anybody who has earned income can contribute to a retirement account, a traditional retirement account, that is. There are three basic classifications of people when it comes to who can contribute to that IRA. So anyone can contribute, but not everybody can deduct. Sounds confusing? Well, it can be. So let's break it down a little bit further into the three classifications of folks who can deduct and what their limits are. So the first set of people is going to be that you and your spouse are not eligible or covered by a retirement plan at work. Like you have no access to a 401k, a 403b, a 457, any kind of retirement plan at work. It's not that you're not participating, it's that you can't because there aren't any. If you qualify or if you fall in this, you're type 1. The second type of people are going to be those who either spouse does have a retirement plan at work. And the last person is, or last type of person is both of you, wife and husband, or partner and partner, have the access to a retirement plan at work. If you're unable to deduct because of your income limits, well, then you have what's called a non-deductible IRA, and you'll get pro rata tax treatment when you take out those gains. Now, for the Roth IRA, that's a little bit more tax favored account. So instead of having contribution or deductibility limits, they actually have contribution limits. As you can see on the table, this is the current Roth contributory limits. So what can you invest in? Just to clarify, because I get asked this so many times, you cannot invest in an IRA. You can invest with the money in your IRA, but you can't say I'm contributing money into my IRA and that's invested and working for me because I just put it in there. Now, 401ks, 403bs, and all those other plans have an automatic default setting. But if you were to go ahead and just open up an IRA and deposit that $6,000 in it, it would just probably be sitting in cash until you actually bought some kind of a security or mutual fund, ETF, or whatever what have you. So you can't invest in it. You invest with the money that you contribute to it. All right. So back to what can I invest in? Remember, for retirement planning, you're investing for retirement. Just because Tesla stock went up 700%, well, it went down today, but went up about 700% in the span of 1 year, probably doesn't mean that you should be investing in Tesla, because for retirement, you want something that is safe and going to give you a predictable rate of return, predictable and acceptable rate of return, because this is your retirement we're talking about. This is not like discretionary money that you're using to invest to see maybe if you're going to, I don't want to use the word betting because Robinhood got sued over gamification of stocks. So we're not betting or gambling, but what we're saying is that for investing, it's very different when you're investing for something. If you're investing just to have more money, then that shouldn't be the strategy for your retirement account. You want more money, yes, but it shouldn't be at all costs. There are risks and rewards when investing in the stock market, and what you want to do is balance the amount of risk with the amount of acceptable reward, or in another way, acceptable amount of risk and what kind of reward can you get? Because as an asset manager, what I do is manage the risk of my clients' assets and, of course, their expectations in order to provide them with a retirement, a successful retirement. Granted, 700% return would be a pretty successful retirement, but what if you lost all that money, as Tesla isn't the most stable stock, and there's a lot of stocks out there that might look good over a couple of years, but is that a long-term strategy? And if that stock went to zero, would that be an acceptable return for you? A negative 100% of all your life savings? Probably not. To learn more about retirement investing or just investing in general, you can go ahead and check other videos on my channel about investing and investing for your retirement. In this video, I'm just going to cover the differences of the account types. We know who can contribute, how much you can make if you want to still deduct, and what you can invest in. Let's start off with the Roth IRA and figure out the pros and cons of paying your taxes now for tax-free distributions. Number one, any of the principal payments you put into the Roth IRA, you're able to take out penalty-free. Now, this means that if I put in $6,000 this week and I decide next week that I need that money back, I'm able to take out that money, no harm, no foul. Now, if my account went down though, say I only have $5,000, then I can't take out the $6,000. Number two, and this is, for me, this is a, light bulb moment that kind of makes me feel like this is the better way, especially if you can make the maximum contribution, is that Roth IRAs have a higher effective contribution limit. So if I put in $5,000 in a Roth IRA, that is equivalent of $6,667 of pre-tax income that I'll be able to put into that account. But yet I can't put in $6,667 into my traditional IRA. Heck, in fact, I can put more than $5,000 into my Roth IRA, right? So assuming a tax rate of 25%, effectively we can contribute more money with a Roth IRA. And to me, the most important part about having the Roth IRA option and using that versus the traditional is that in retirement, you have a much more flexible distribution protocol. You don't have to pay that much attention to how much you take out. You also don't have to worry about having to take out required minimum distributions. So your tax circumstances in retirement is far more predictable and far less complicated. What are the cons? There are obviously cons to having this. Well, the first one is obvious. You don't get to write it off. Many people need the deduction now and believe that in the future they will have a much lower tax rate, so that having a bigger deduction now makes way more sense than taking a big deduction now and potentially not even needing to pay taxes in the future. Next thing about for Roth IRAs, a bad thing is that the perceived tax benefits may never be realized if you don't make it to retirement. If you have a premature death or if something were to happen to you, that account would be transferred to your beneficiaries and you yourself would have no benefit from having that Roth IRA. So what three factors would I use when figuring out if I should do a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA? Well, the first one would be, is my marginal tax rate higher than 22%? If it's higher, then we might consider a traditional IRA. Next one is, how much do you plan on contributing to your retirement plan? If you're planning to max out that contribution, then potentially doing the Roth IRA is the better choice. Well, because you have more room to grow with a Roth IRA. And lastly, how well do you want to manage your retirement? Do you want to really have it honed down to make sure that you are, number one, not paying too much for Social Security taxes, not paying too much for Medicare, and doing all that? Do you want to do that? As someone who manages other people's ones, I can tell you that having a Roth IRA makes it a lot easier and a lot less hassle, because you don't have to really play with the traditional IRA or 401k distributions to make sure you fall under certain income restrictions in retirement. Now, I'm not saying that you should try and live off the lowest amount possible. We'll go into an example soon. But I'm just saying that it makes life a lot easier if you have more tax-free accounts to pull income from in retirement. One last note before we get into an example is you don't have to do one or the other. You can do both. And the contribution limitations and all that stuff is still the same, but you can do a blend of, let's say, $3,000 in the Roth, $3,000 in the traditional, $1,000 in the Roth, $5,000 in the traditional. It's really up to you. It just depends on your current situations and how you want to plan for your retirement. So let's take a look at this wonderful example I found on Fidelity using different numbers for the average person, male, 72, because they need to take RMD with the Secure Act, making the average amount of Social Security income with the average account balance. Let's see what their tax predicament and their federal program predicament looks like if they had a Roth or if they had a traditional IRA. And this puts some stresses in there. Let's say what happens if they need to take out more money because of some kind of medical expense or some kind of just any kind of event where they need more money. Let's say I'm 72 years old. I make $1,503 per month from Social Security, which is the average Social Security benefit in 2020. I have $160,200 in my 401k, which is the average for someone in their 70s. My RMD is 25.6% life expectancy factor, or 3.906% of my $160,200 account, which is approximately $6,257.41. My tax rate for my Social Security is 0. Awesome. Let's say, for example, I need to take an additional $20,000 from my IRA or from my 401k due to some sort of need. Now that would notch up my taxes to about $2,000, and effectively the distribution would cost me 10%. Now let's take it up a notch and say I need an additional $50,000. Now my total tax would be $8,500. The distribution would cost me 17%. And even if these were medical deductible or medical expenses are what we call below the line deductions. So they don't decrease your modified adjusted gross income, which a lot of the tax rates and costs of things like Medicare premiums, things like Social Security tax are based off of. Not to mention, if this person was actually only making $1,500 per month, plus the $6,200 distribution, they would qualify for federal aid from Medicare in the Extra Help program, which would lower the cost for all the prescription medications and potentially pay for most of his drug costs. If I were, for some reason, to need expensive medications, but I took this big distribution, I'd be kicked out of the Extra Help program, and now I'll need to expedite more money out of my IRA, pay more taxes just to pay for the things that I was already getting due to my federal subsidy. So, not to scare you guys or to tell you everyone needs to live off of $20,000 a year. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that tax planning and retirement tax planning does get a lot harder if all of your money is in a 401k deferred or a traditional IRA deferred tax account. And remember, retirement is a plan. It's a plan to replace your income when you retire from your job, when you stop working. Retirement has to be taken, a planned approach needs to be taken with what I call the 4 L's. Longevity risk, that's the risk of outliving your money. Liquidity risk is the risk of needing a lump sum payment, right? That's what we kind of discussed. What would happen if I needed a lump sum amount? Now, the two other L's are the fun stuff. That's the goals. You have a lifestyle goal. Maybe you want to go shopping every day, eat out, never want to cook again, never want to stay at home for more than 2 months at a time and travel. And the last L is that legacy, where you want to leave something behind for those you leave behind. And all of that has its own intricacies, its own planning problems. And with that, I'll leave you guys. I hope this video helped out, kind of give you a good idea of why the Roth IRA, in my opinion, is a little bit more favorable in a multitude of ways, but not to defer you from not contributing to any kind of account. The main thing you do is get started. And if you do want to get started with investing, Webull has an awesome opportunity till the end of 2020, where if you open an account and deposit $100 using my link down below, you'll get 4 free stocks. All that can be worth up to $1,600. No guarantees. Let me know what you get, and I'll see you in the next video.